Uh-huh.
Please join me in welcoming Dr. Reverend Gay Morse. On that note, do we have any visitors in the sanctuary today? Would you like to welcome yourself on the microphone? Okay. Would the AV team please allow us to know who's on Zoom today?
We have Christy Marsh, Happy Eubank, Leslie Bunn, M. Marsh, Stormy Burkett, Teresa, and Wendy Pesh.
Thank you for waving at them. We invite everyone in the sanctuary to please silence your cell phones, and if you're sitting near the chancel, please turn off your cell phone to avoid interference with the sound system, and all those on Zoom, please turn off your cameras to conserve bandwidth. Now, will everyone please turn and greet one another? Okay. Okay.
I think I'm going to try to read off of the verse.
Okay.
So, yeah, so we'll just, oh, well,
I think we can do it.
say la vie. Mute, unmute. I know so many people wish they had that button for me.
I'm sorry.
My students will be like, just mute it. Now, Stacy's son, what is his name? Matt. Thank you. I taught him, but it was a while back, and I'm like, it's M something. What's he up to these days?
So he works at Big Lots, and he's finishing up his photography degree over at the college. So he was doing dual enrolled when he was at Mass doing high school stuff. So he's wrapping up this summer. He should graduate with some type of certification. We think it's similar to an associate's in photography.
Does he have his own equipment?
So they let him use it from the school. Yeah. So
I was asking because
after the summer he'll have to buy his own. He bought himself a little digital one, but it's not the same as what they've been working with.
I was only asking because Carter Writers Group is going to have a meeting in August, and we're going to take pictures of the members, and I've asked her photographer to come. She can only do like an hour of the 2 hours, and I was like,
Yeah,
but maybe
you might be able
I'll
to.
talk to him and see if he can come. Kind of like, it's just,
Yeah.
I think we need.
It's gonna be a long service if we don't. Last week, we celebrated the 4th of July, and Megan discovered this poem by Allison Adele Hedge Koch a while ago, and long before the current events of this summer. She will read America, I Sing You Back with me in poetic celebration. America, I sing you back what sung you in, sing you back the moment you cherished breath, sing you home into yourself and back to reason.
Before America began to sing, I sung her to sleep, held her cradleboard, wept her into day. My song gave her creation, prepared her delivery, held her severed cord beautifully beaded.
My song helped her stand, held her hand for first steps, nourished her very being, fed her, placed her 3 sisters strong. My song comforted her as she battled my reason, broke my long-held footing sure, as any child might do.
As she pushed herself away, forced me to remove myself, as I cried for this country, my song grew roses in each tear's fall. My blood-veined rivers painted pipestone quarries, circled canyons, while she made herself maiden fine.
But I am here I am, here I remain high on each and every peak, carefully rumbling her great underbelly, prepared to pour forth singing.
And sing again I will, as I have always done, never silenced, unless in the company of strangers, singing the stoic face, polite repose, polite while dancing deep inside, polite mother of her world, sister of myself.
When my song sings aloud again, when I call her back to cradle, call her to peer into waters, to behold herself in dark and light, day and night, call her to sing along, call her to mature, to envision, then she will quake herself over. My song will make it so.
When she grows far past her self-considered purpose, I will sing her back, sing her back. I will sing, oh I will, I do. America, I sing back what sung you in.
Come, let us worship together. Reverend Morris, will you assist me, please? We are going to light our chalice together.
Our chalice lighting words this morning come from David Breeden. Our light is the light of the sun, keeper of all we love. Our light is the light of the earth, provider of sustenance. Our light is the light of all living things, precious like our own. Our light is the light of each of us, bound together in need and hope. Our light is the light of the cosmos, keeper of all we know. We also light our peace candle to remind us that peace is a process that requires work. Peace is not merely an absence of conflict, but the presence of justice.
Please rise as you are willing and able and sing together hymn 360, Here We Have Gathered.
Here we have gathered side by side, circle of kinship, come and step inside. May all who seek here find a kindly word. May all who speak here feel they have been heard. Lying now together, this our heart's own song. Here we have gathered, called to celebrate days of our lifetime, matters small and great. We of all ages, women, children, men, infants and sages, sharing what we can, sing now together this our heart's own song. Life has its battles, sorrows and regret, but in the shadows let us not forget. We who now gather know each other's pain. Kindness can heal us as we give, we gain. Sing now together in Fred's own song.
It's now time for all ages. I have stories on the slide.
Thank you and good morning. Our story today is about Jesus visiting a couple of uppity women. Jesus was a teacher, and as he taught, he traveled around with his students. Imagine how tiring it would be to teach on the road. I find it tiring enough sitting in front of a computer screen teaching my students. In the Gospel of Luke, right after he tells the story of the Good Samaritan, Jesus and his group arrive in, as it says, a certain village. And this was Bethany, about 2 miles from Jerusalem. And his good friends, Mary, Martha, and their brother Lazarus, lived there. So here's how his visit went. It's a very short paragraph in the Gospel of Luke, but this is according to the translation of Sarah Rudin of the Gospel. While they were traveling, he came to a certain village, and a certain woman named Martha took him in as a guest. And she had a sister called Miriam, who was sitting at the master's feet and listening to what he was saying. Now, Martha was bustling around with the extensive work of hospitality, but then she stood in front of him and said, "Master, don't you mind that my sister's left me to do all this work alone? Then tell her to come help me." But the master answered by telling her, "Martha, Martha, you're worried and agitated over so many things, but only one's necessary. Miriam, you see, has chosen the excellent part of all this, and it's not going to be taken away from her." So this morning, I think it's interesting to think of what that scene looks like, but also look at some representations of the scene that are featured in classical art. And these particular images come from the Visual Commentary on Scripture, which is a website project of King's College London. On that website, John Skillen's commentary on the painting, first of all, by Johannes Vermeer, is entitled "Christ in the House of Martha and Mary." and it was painted around 1654. And John Skillen points out that this painting shows an intimate exchange between the two sisters and Jesus. Martha, at the top of the composition, seems to have just entered the room with a basket of bread for the meal. We can imagine her having asked Jesus, "Do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone?" And Jesus has turned to Martha while he gestures with a loosely opened hand towards Miriam or Mary. Seated at his feet, her head resting on her hand and elbow on knee, Mary gazes intently upwards, and there's a kind of counterclockwise movement in that dynamic. Jesus is looking at Martha while pointing to Mary, and to Skillen, this double action draws the sisters together rather than dividing them. But the next picture, the next painting by Diego Velázquez, with the same title and painted slightly earlier, around 1618, is very different in its emphasis. The title scene is tucked into a corner of the painting. Jesus is in the background in a view as if through a hatch, and in the next room, with Mary seated on the floor. Martha seems to be speaking, gesticulating with her hand. But first, we can't help but see the larger images to the left, two women in the kitchen, and the young woman who is pouting is looking right at us. I know a 9-year-old who does that pout very well. John Skillen writes that there is no avoiding an association of the young woman doing kitchen duty with Martha. The suggestion of moodiness, fingers reddened by her grip on the pestle, is the dominant motif. Strong individual personality is conveyed. This young woman is not an idealized model of the Christian tradition's active life. So, looking at this picture, I ask you, do you feel any affection or empathy for the young woman, or maybe just curiosity for anyone who has begrudgingly done the dishes, and that's probably most of us? We can relate. And John Skillen asks, getting cranky about the housework? Place yourself in Martha's shoes. You may well agree in that case with Jesus when he says, Mary has chosen the excellent part of all this. And we will further explore the implications of this scene in more depth in just a few minutes.
Really put myself in Martha's shoes. All right. Joys and concerns. Okay. Every week we make some space and time to be human and celebrate our joys and grieve our sorrows together. Should you wish to share a personal joy or concern about a person or persons in your life, there is a paper to fill out over here near the basket on your way to the chalice. After our ritual, I will read these personal joys and concerns to the congregation. We line up over by the wall, and we select these stones here or shells to represent our joys and concerns from the basket and gently place them into the chalice of water. Megan will play piano, and I invite you to our stones and water ritual. Thank you, Megan. Sorry. Reverend Ma does this much quieter. Let's see. I do have a community concern I'd like to share. Siding in love with the UU congregation of Kingston, Massachusetts, after their historic building was unfortunately vandalized on July 4th. So now for our personal joys and concerns. This past week, Miss Pat Harms moved into Carteret Landing Assisted Living. She is in apartment D6 on the same hallway as Happy and T. This may soon be called the UCF wing. Her new mailing address is in the data breeze. A certain joy. Barb Thomas completed her chemotherapy on Wednesday and rang the bell at the Robb Clinic. She is so thankful for the excellent care she got there. Bob and Barb are camping, of course, at Kerr Lake with their family this week to celebrate. Another joy for certain, Summer turns 4 on July 9th. Woo! To be 4. Xander is leaving for Navy boot camp tomorrow. So we're excited about that, and we wish him luck. Now I invite Reverend Morris to give the pastoral prayer.
The words of Richard Gilbert. O Spirit of compassion, enter our hearts, we pray, be with us in the hard hours. O Spirit of unity, help us enter into the pain of our neighbors. Let us walk where they walk, that we might speak a gentle word along the way. O Spirit of love, enlarge our sympathies toward all troubled folk. Let us be generous of heart, that we might forgive and be forgiven. O Spirit of thanksgiving, let us be grateful for the hands that serve, for those that give, and for those who receive. O Spirit of life, let us walk together in our weakness, that by treading the path together, we may be made strong. O Spirit of the spheres, help us to face the mystery of being. Secure us in the larger patterns we can trust, and bless us this holy day. For all joys and sorrows that have been spoken or have been held close, we ask for a blessing. In the name of all that is holy, amen.
Please join me in singing our children out to their classes. Blessing, you were born, and it matters what you do. What you know about God is a piece of the truth. Let the beauty, love, be what you do, and you don't have to do it alone. It's a blessing, you were born, and it matters what you do. What you know about God is a piece of the truth. Let the beauty you love be what I do, and I don't have to do it alone. It's a blessing we were born, and it matters what we do. What we know about God is a piece of the truth. Let the beauty we love be what we do, and we don't have to do it alone. I'm glad someone did it. I invite you now into a moment of silence and meditation.
Well, thank you for inviting me again. It's always good to be here. Elizabeth Cady Stanton was angry. For decades, she and Susan B. Anthony led the movement for women's suffrage in America. And as she advanced in years, and the suffrage movement inched closer, slowly, to changing the hearts and minds of Americans about a woman's right to vote, Stanton realized that the dominant Christian ideology in America was poised to subvert the radical improvement to women's lives in all areas: political, economic, social, and sexual subordination. Sound familiar? That women's suffrage would reform. Stanton's last efforts in the public sphere went into fighting the prevailing orthodox beliefs that God is male and that the status of females in society is secondary, subject to male leadership, and also in Christianity, derivative, the female created after the male, according to the book of Genesis. And so she wrote her own Bible. The publication in 1895 of the Women's Bible, which was really a commentary on the Bible, drew ridicule and censure from even her sister suffragists. But her theological assertion that male and female souls were of equal worth was informed by Universalist Olympia Brown and Unitarians like Theodore Parker. Feminist critique of the Bible since the time of Stanton has fostered solidarity across global communities of faith. Important theological thought coming from women in Latin America, the Philippines, Africa, who are Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, and Muslim. One of the pioneers of the second wave of feminist biblical criticism is a German Roman Catholic, Elisabeth Schussler-Fiorenza. Fiorenza broadened the feminist critique beyond the Bible, outside the New Testament canon, to other little-known writings about and for women in the early Christian tradition. There's an abundance of writings from that period that help to give a fuller picture of the complex religious teachings and spiritual practices of the time, due to the influence on Israel of both Rome and Greece. One of the most memorable things Fiorenza points out about the Bible is a paradox, that the Bible is written in androcentric language, has its origins in the patriarchal cultures of antiquity, and has functioned throughout its history to inculcate androcentric and patriarchal values. And at the same time, the Bible has also served to inspire and authorize women and other non-persons in their struggle against patriarchal oppression. Jesus, of course, is a historical as well as a theological figure. To Fiorenza, Jesus is significant because he led a renewal movement within Judaism that advocated a liberating inclusivity and justice for all. His work to liberate the poor and oppressed and to establish a just order empowers women in situations of oppression. Jesus is a norm breaker. And when we look at the lives of women in the period of the New Testament, we see just how radical his acceptance and encouragement was of women in his circle of followers and beyond. Carol Myers, writing in the Woman's Bible Commentary, points out that only about 9% of all the names that appear in the Hebrew Bible are female, and that the Bible has a male bias based on the fact that most of the authors are male. She points out that issues pertinent to women's lives are present in the Bible only in minor or tangential ways. In the later period of the New Testament, it's not much different until we get to the founding of the church under the Apostle Paul. So, determining what women's lives were like, apart from playing multiple domestic roles, such as mothers, daughters, wives, and also bakers, weavers, worshipers, is difficult if we just look at the Bible. But Myers writes that for women, life apart from households was not a possibility. The intrinsic worth of being a woman in cultural terms is really only a fairly recent occurrence. During this year's commencement season, you may have heard about the Kansas City Chiefs football star whose speech to the graduates of the Benedictine College went viral. Part of his speech referred to the preference young women should have for marriage and motherhood over career advancement. Homemaker, he said, is one of the most important titles of all. Harrison Butker is a Roman Catholic who believes that God has given him a celebrity platform for urging his fellow Catholics to turn toward Christ for a successful life. But to use a phrase that evangelical Christians like to use, what would Jesus do? when confronted with this admonishment to young women. Luckily, we can refer to a scene in the Gospels where there is such a situation, but maybe Butker hasn't read that part of the Bible for his faith formation. And so this morning, we have come to the household of Mary and Martha, and they're thought to have lived with their brother Lazarus, and they appear in the Gospels in several places and stories. Their connection to Jesus is that of friends. They were not disciples, but they spent a lot of time together. Their home was in Bethany, 2 miles from Jerusalem, so Jesus seems to pop in to visit them quite frequently. And the story that we explored today was from the Gospel of Luke in chapter 10. For a feminist reading of that story, I refer to the Woman's Bible Commentary, and it's edited by Carol Newsom and Sharon Ringe, and the Luke passage is critiqued there by feminist scholar Jane Shaberg. But this story has prompted commentary on spiritual life, beginning all the way back to the 3rd century from the theologian Origen. In Catholic theology, Thomas Aquinas contrasted the active life and the contemplative life. And Martha, of course, represents service and domestic life, and Mary, the better part of monastic learning. As Luke tells the story, Martha is making excessive preparations as Mary sits silently at the feet of Jesus. All the busy work distracts Martha from his teachings, which we don't have recorded in this story. But Martha asked Jesus to tell Mary that she should come help her, and Shaberg writes that he gently chides Martha and leaves things as they are. Her request denied, Martha is silenced. She is the loser, with whom the reader is not supposed to identify, but with whom many readers do. Now, there are some observations we can make about this scene, and the first is the cliche of sitting at someone's feet. It's indicative of a student in a subordinate position, but of course at that time, rabbinic students would be male. For Mary to assume that posture signals her readiness to learn from the rabbi Jesus, perhaps a female theological student before her time. Looking back and knowing now how exalted the words of Jesus are, not only to Christians but to people of all faiths, it's easy to ask why Martha passes up the opportunity to sit and listen to Jesus. And to answer, we need to recognize the importance of hospitality in Hebrew culture. There are many stories in the scriptures, including quite a racy one featuring Abraham and Sarah, that tell us how fundamental it was to welcome the stranger and to offer refreshment to whomever steps across the threshold. Not surprising then for Martha to want her home to be ready for her visiting friend. He always brought a crowd with him who would be hanging on his every word. So imagine the extra work involved in cooking, cleaning, and other preparations. She was so distracted to such a degree, however, that she missed how special it was to hear what Jesus had to say. We could say she couldn't see the forest for the trees. It's kind of like the story of Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, who decided to go on a camping trip, and after dinner and a bottle of wine, they laid down for the night and went to sleep. And some hours later, Holmes awoke and nudged his faithful friend, "Watson, look up at the sky and tell me what you see." Watson replied, "I see millions of stars." "What does that tell you?" Watson pondered for a minute. "Astronomically, it tells me that there are millions of galaxies and potentially billions of planets. Astrologically, I believe that Saturn is in Leo. Horologically, I deduce that the time is approximately 3:15. Theologically, I can see God as all-powerful and that we are small and insignificant. Meteorologically, I suspect we will have a beautiful day tomorrow. What does it tell you, Holmes?" Holmes was silent for a minute, then spoke. "Watson, you idiot, someone has stolen our tent." So it's easy to miss the significance of things as they are happening. We can miss important moments of insight, and Martha was no different. One other thing we can miss noticing in Luke's story, because we Americans are often unaware of gender boundaries that other cultures impose in domestic spaces, is that there were physical spaces in homes where women were not allowed on their own when other men not related to them were present. The presence of male guests in the home would have necessitated women to be in the presence of the males of their family. So Martha would have been very daring indeed to sit with Jesus and perhaps male disciples without her brother Lazarus or another male relative present. Another observation we can make is that both women end up being silenced in this scene. As she sits at Jesus' feet, Mary is not asking questions or engaging in dialogue. She is listening passively and silently. You have to look at the other stories of the Bethany siblings, like the visit Jesus makes after Lazarus dies, to find Mary speaking. And an interesting point that I observe as someone who teaches communication is that Martha asked Jesus instead of her sister for help. Indirect communication. This is triangulation. Martha trying to entangle Jesus in the sisters' dysfunctional relationship. The part silence plays here is really important to notice. It seems the two sisters are not speaking to each other. And the tension of the scene is acknowledged by Velázquez in his painting, Christ at the House of Martha and Mary, in 1618. In it, he portrays Martha as a pouting young woman, gripping the pestle on the kitchen table as she grinds an ingredient for the meal. The commentator John Skillen says that her moodiness is the picture's dominant motif, asking us to step into Martha's shoes and feel cranky about the housework ourselves. If Mary, listening to Jesus who sat at his feet, was right in choosing what he called the better part, was Martha wrong? Martha was doing good work to offer hospitality, but Mary, Jesus says, has made the better choice. Maybe we need to be reminded that in addition to reading the story and noticing domestic norms, we need to be reading the historical context. Why is this story told in the gospel? Well, biblical scholar Jane Shaberg points out that at the end of the 1st century CE, when Luke wrote this gospel, the emerging church was engaging in a debate over roles and offices in the early house churches, some of which had in fact been founded by women. The technical term diaconia refers to a position held by a church member that combines 3 responsibilities: table service for the Eucharistic ritual, proclaiming the word or preaching, and church leadership. In the story of Mary and Martha, Luke separates the rituals of table service and the word being proclaimed. In the New Testament book of Acts, also written by Luke and telling the story of the early church, we can see that preaching the word and table service are separate roles. And in addition, service is subordinate to the preaching ministry. And the disappearance of diaconia for women happens soon in the early church and becomes reserved only for men. We should note that just in 2021, Pope Francis changed the law of the Catholic Church to allow women to serve at the altar again, back after only 1900 years or so. As for allowing women into the exclusively male spheres of theological education and ordination, the timeline is not quite as long. Remember when I earlier mentioned the influence Olympia Brown had on Elizabeth Cady Stanton? In 1863, Brown graduated from St. Lawrence Theological School and became the first woman minister in America whose ordination was recognized by a denomination. Many women like Mary over the centuries wanted to sit at the feet of a teacher, but again, the church prevented them from being able to proclaim the word until very recently in the timeline of Christianity. Getting back to the contrast epitomized by Mary and Martha between work or the word, we could say we've come a long way, baby. And since the women's liberation movement in the 80s, we can have it all. Women can be domestic goddesses and break the glass ceiling in careers, including the church. Is that a good thing? Is that even a thing? Well, maybe. But just look at the statistics concerning gender imbalance during the COVID pandemic. Mona Andrews from Forbes Business Council says that women already bore much of the unpaid household labor and caregiving before the pandemic. The World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report 2020 estimated that we would not achieve gender parity for another 257 years. And that was before economies were devastated by the pandemic. Andrews says that with school closures and many companies transitioning to remote work, the additional workload brought by COVID-19 fell mostly on women's shoulders. And a survey in November 2020 by the Center for Economic and Policy Research estimated that working moms were spending 15 more hours than working dads on childcare and household chores per week. Rebecca Alwine reported that between February and October 2020, nearly 2.2 million women were forced to leave the labor force. The U.S. Department of Labor reported the economy lost 140,000 jobs in December 2020, all of which had been held by women. Have we really come so far since the days of Luke and the early church, edging out women from positions of leadership, or of Elizabeth Cady Stanton trying to combat the insidious forces of patriarchy in the Christian church and in Christian and in American democracy? Episcopal priest and feminist scholar Maya Gwynn McDowell writes, "Only those who benefit from the patriarchal system view the gospel as not political. Those who experience injustice know the gospel challenges all politics of oppression and repression, and so cannot help but be political." If we learn anything at all from the story of Mary and Martha, it could be that in encouraging the sisters to choose the better part, learning, spiritual growth, self-care, attention over distraction and busyness, Jesus can be seen in a subversive light, beyond the intended message of Luke, which is to undermine the leadership of women. And if we look at the sisters' appearances in other stories, in John's Gospel, for example, we see that they are both loved by Jesus and that they perform some important prophetic actions. In fact, Martha is the one who, after her brother Lazarus dies, in the depths of grief, she makes the confession out loud to Jesus that he is the Messiah, the Son of God. Mary, in the very next chapter of John's Gospel, comes to the dinner being held in Jesus' honor and infuriates the men around the table by pouring a pound of pure perfume onto Jesus' feet and wiping them with her hair. The extravagance of both of these actions by brave women models the breaking of limits that society and culture impose on us and inspires us to burst through the boundaries that we place around our own selves when we proclaim the word of our faith and act in service to a greater good. As I began this sermon, I mentioned the football kicker who berated women for wanting a career. It's ironic that barely 1 month after Harrison Butker's commencement speech elevating the vocation of homemaker to female graduates, a player who had a heart attack during a Chiefs team meeting was revived by a female trainer who was actually notified by Butker as the incident happened. Social media was quick to point out that the female trainer saved Thompson's life because she was a trainer and not a stay-at-home mom. Wonder if Butker sees the irony in that incident. It seems like threats to the patriarchy are being perceived and met with privileged male pushback as women in today's world grow in influence, or should I say, as Taylor Swift grows in influence. She is someone whose latest tour has made a significant difference in global commerce. Quick to speak up in trying to limit Swift's cultural influence is John McLean, whose opinion piece in Newsweek this month asks if she is a good role model. He writes that at 34 years of age, Swift remains unmarried and childless, a fact that some might argue is irrelevant to her status as a role model, but I suggest, he writes, it's crucial to consider what kind of example this sets for young girls. A role model, by definition, is someone worthy of imitation. While Swift's musical talent and business acumen are certainly admirable, even laudable, he says, we must ask if her personal life choices are ones we want our sisters and daughters to emulate. A few paragraphs on, he gets to the heart of the matter. The superstar's vocal criticisms of the patriarchy add another layer of complexity. There, he says it. Swift's recent rallying cry against patriarchal structures stands in stark contrast to her personal dating choices. The singer often dates strong, influential men, celebrities who embody significant social and economic power. This can appear hypocritical, he says. Hypocrisy fundamentally undermines the ability to be a good role model because it involves a contradiction between one's actions and the principles or values they publicly advocate. This article got a sharp rebuttal in lots of places, and the British writer Claire Cohen in Standard UK wrote, "It positions a woman's worth in terms of her duty towards men and sends us back to an era in which we were little more than walking wombs." And she also asked rhetorically if a similar sentiment was going to be voiced about pop star Harry Styles, who is the same age and also unmarried and childless. Probably not. So we've been looking explicitly at the male-female paradigm that dominates still Western society, Christianity, and culture. Even as our understanding of gender fluidity increases, it's striking that male-female role expectations remain stubbornly rigid. And even undergird legislation we see being enacted in states as well as in national legal decisions. So we recognize that as in ancient times, men's experience is still the norm. But reflecting on feminist readings of the Bible and of stories like those of Mary and Martha, they can help us recognize, value, and center the experiences of women from long ago and today by making the invisible visible. Let us go beyond the boundaries and expectations of culture, gender, society, and religion. Let us strive for liberation and wisdom that comes to all of us when we listen to a variety of voices, ancient and modern. Blessed be.
I was ready. Would you please remain seated and join together in singing hymn 212, We Are Dancing Sarah's Circle.
We are dancing Sarah's circle. We are dancing Sarah's circle. We are dancing Sarah's circle. Sisters, brothers, all. Here we seek and find our history. Here we seek and find our history. Here we seek and find our history. Sisters, brothers, all. We will all do our own naming. We will all do our own naming. We will all do our own naming. Sisters, brothers, all. Every round a generation. Every round a generation. Every round a generation. Sisters, brothers, all. On and on the circles moving. On and on the circles moving. On and on the circles moving. Sisters, brothers, all.
I invite the greeters forward to collect today's offering, as well as Joe Ellen and Sue.
Each month, the Social Justice Committee selects a local nonprofit to share the plate with UCF. All non-pledge contributions in the collection plate or online are split between the nonprofit and UCF. Please remember to designate that this is either pledge or share the plate. For the month of July, the recipient will be Citizens for Diversity in Education Scholarship Fund. This morning, my dear friend Sue Shorer is here to tell us a little about the work of the Citizens for Diversity in Education.
Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. You should know better than to give a retired professor a podium and a microphone. What were you thinking? We're programmed to speak for 50 minutes. For that reason, I have written a presentation that I've timed, so you can relax. No 50-minute lecture. I thank you on behalf of Citizens for Diversity in Education for your interest in our group and your generosity today. I'm honored to be here to speak for the group and to tell you a little bit about our recent history. Citizens for Diversity in Education, CDE, started in 2010 with one mission in mind: to increase the number of teachers of color in Carteret County schools so that children of color would have role models and allies they could look up to. The first years were difficult in spite of the interest and cooperation of the Carteret County school system for one simple reason. Every school system in North Carolina and far beyond was attempting the same thing. Young teachers of color graduating from college were being courted and hired well before their college graduations. It was time for us to reach out for new ideas and inspiration. We addressed this problem in 2022 with our Grow Your Own scholarship. And you were the first group to donate to us, for which we are very grateful indeed. In the first 2 years of the scholarship, 22 and 23, we were able to give funding to excellent students. However, in 2023, only one student applied for the scholarship. Where were the others? Was it possible that they were falling through the cracks of the high school advising system? For a number of reasons, it appeared that might be true. We discovered, for just one example, that the stated college requirements from all of the state universities in North Carolina, and others as well, differ dramatically from the average achievements of incoming freshmen. All North Carolina state universities post a required grade point average of 2.5. But the grade point average for incoming freshmen at UNC Chapel Hill, the average, mind you, is a 4.35. Math and foreign language achievements of incoming freshmen are far above what is stated as required by those universities. This prompted us to organize 2 workshops in the fall and winter of 2023-24. The first workshop was to assist 8th graders of color to navigate their high school curricula to make them as competitive as possible when they themselves applied for college. The second workshop, held at the community college in a computer lab, focused on helping students of color apply for scholarships of all kinds, including ours. And this resulted in 5 applications for our scholarship this past spring. We had excellent students apply and were able to give 5 scholarships. One of those students will return to Carteret County, as a teacher in 2028. But in our search for answers, we did not stay in a Carteret County bubble. We reached out for inspiration and guidance, as luck would have it, to the Watson School of Education at UNC Wilmington at exactly the moment that they were organizing, Professor Fumbles. They were organizing a regional-wide focus on educators of color. We have joined that group, have attended several events, done a lot of networking, and also applied for a brand new initiative funding effort. We are one of 2 counties in eastern North Carolina to receive $2,000 in 2023 and again in 2024. This money is being used to assist teaching assistants of color with their efforts to become teachers themselves. We have now given $2,000 to a teaching assistant of color from Carteret County Schools who will stay in Carteret County and teach as soon as he finishes his degree. So we are making progress, slowly. It is taking all of the ingenuity we can muster, but we are undeterred. I conclude by saying thank you most heartily from CDE for whatever funding you can afford to share with us today, and also that we need new membership. When I joined CDE in 2020, we had 8 members. Today, we have only 4 to 6 active members. Some of us have just aged out. So if any of you feel called to join us, please contact Jo Ellen or me, and we would be happy to tell you more about our organization. Thank you.
Please join in, thank you, ladies. Please join in blessing this offering with hymn 402, From You I Receive. We will sing it twice through. You I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live. join me in our chalice extinguishing? Please. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And now in Español. Extinguíamos esta llama, pero no la luz de verdad, el calor de comunidad o el fuego de nuestro compromiso. Estos los llevamos en el corazón hasta que estemos juntos otra vez. Please stand as you are willing and able for our closing hymn, 1008, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place.
When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, and a living love and amazing grace, when our heart is in a holy place, when we tell our story from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words, when our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace, when our heart is in a holy place. When we share the silence of sacred place, and the God of our heart stirs within, and we feel the power of each other's face, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place.
Now for our benediction, it is UCF tradition to join hands and form anything close to a semicircle. However, if you prefer not to hold hands, you can stay in the center and we'll surround you with presence and love. I now give it to Reverend Gay for our benediction.
Let us go forth now and do that which calls us to make this world more loving, more compassionate, and more filled with the grace of our presence every day. Blessed be. Amen.